Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, here today to give my review on Manchester by the Sea, which is the 2016-2017 for us in the UK drama film directed by Kenneth Lonergan, starring Casey Affleck, Lucas Hedges and Michelle Williams. This is actually Lonergan's third feature film, third drama film as well, and this has been bringing in universal acclaim all across the board. It's currently sitting at a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's been nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Original Screenplay as well. So this is a huge contender this year for the Academy Awards, and I mean, it's already picked up a Golden Globe as well for Casey Affleck's performance. So the plot to Manchester by the Sea, for anyone who doesn't know, is about a character called Lee Chandler, played by Casey Affleck, who is asked to take care of his teenage nephew, played by Lucas Hedges, after the boy's father dies. Very simple premise, but if anyone's dealt with loss before, anything like that, it's a very universal message. It deals with loss, reconciliation, depression, and all the mix of emotions that go through in an event like this. So, as always, this will be a review in 2 parts. I'll begin with a spoiler-free section, and I'll warn you guys when I do get to spoilers later on in the review. There's a few twists and plot elements that I want to save for spoilers, so don't be worried about me giving anything away at the beginning of this review. So actually, this was a film, if I'm going to go into my initial thoughts, that I hadn't seen any clips for, or any trailers or anything like that prior to seeing this film. I went in completely cold, only knowing the amount of praise that this film's been picking up in terms of its performances and direction and everything that goes along with that. And if I'm going to be completely honest, I was incredibly let down by this movie. To me, and I know I still have to see many films for this Academy Awards year, you know how every year there's always that film that builds up unanimous praise. You watch it and then you kind of think, I don't know whether this praise is merited. I don't know if these performances are as good as people have said. I don't know if the direction's as good as people said. Manchester by the Sea is this year's equivalent of that. Now, is it a bad movie? No. Are there good elements to each of the performances? Yes, but I do think that those moments are very few and far between in this movie, and I'm going to get into it now. So if we kick off with Casey Affleck, the guy who's won the Golden Globe for his performance, the character he plays, Lee Chandler, and this is where it's very difficult for me to fall on either side of this performance, because I understand where he's coming from in terms of his performance and how he portrays the character. We get introduced to Lee Chandler at the beginning of this film. He's a very depressed guy. He's kind of working a dead-end job. He's got no enthusiasm in anything he does in his life. And that comes through in the performance. It's a very monotone and spaced-out performance that Casey Affleck is giving, which works for the character. However, when you have a 2-hour, 20-minute movie, yes, this movie is just short of 2.5 hours, he maintains that element throughout the entire movie. And I can't tell if it's genius or not that there's no change to him. You see elements of change, but no clear-cut character arc in terms of how he actually portrays the character by the end of the movie. I can't give too much away about this. I'm going to save it for spoilers, because we find out what initially caused that change in him to be this depressive guy that we get introduced to. And really, because he is playing this very bland character, that can at times come across as very uninteresting. The most interesting moments of this film are where we see him either break down or cry or show that crack of emotion to this shell of a character that he is playing. Those moments he absolutely shines, and I wish we could have seen more of that, or if he could have really played up that a lot more. For example, the standout scene of this movie and the scene that's on the poster when he's toe-to-toe with Michelle Williams, which I'll get onto her in a minute, she completely blows him out of the water with her performance in this movie. And she's in it relatively a short amount of time. She's probably only in it for about 3 scenes or so, 3 or 4 scenes, but her scenes do carry the biggest emotional punch of the entire movie. So we also have our supporting actor as well, Lucas Hedges, who plays the kid whose father has passed away and is now thrust into the care of his uncle, played by Casey Affleck. This kid was an annoying little brat all the way through this movie. And again, I know that you could argue that that's part of the character. That's how he's dealing with things. He's very arrogant, he's very selfish, and you could chalk that up to how he's adjusting to that in his own life. As I said at the beginning, if anyone's gone through this before or gone through a loss like this, if you can drop me a comment if this is a natural state of emotion that people go through, hey, feel free. This is me just watching this as a casual viewer, just throwing my 2 cents out there on the internet. I found him an incredibly unlikable character. And again, the only good scenes with the character are when he breaks down or he shows that emotional vulnerability to him, which he may have been masking up until this point in the film, and then when it all comes to a head and there's just this complete catharsis of emotion, that's where, as a viewer, I was engaged with the character and the drama that was happening. That being said, it is a 2-hour 20 movie, and there were some moments where I was checking my watch to see how long it had to wrap up. But there is a twist that happens towards just before the halfway point, I would say, in the film. And that is where I started to engage with the film and the drama and the story a lot more. It's actually going to be very interesting if I do get round to a second viewing of this film and maybe give it another chance. With that knowledge in mind of what happens from the beginning of the film, maybe that will change my perception of the entire film. But the other performance I need to talk about is Michelle Williams, who is going up for Best Supporting Actress for her role in this. She plays the ex-wife or ex-girlfriend of Casey Affleck, and she is by far, leaps and bounds, the standout of this entire movie. The scene I referred to earlier where she stands toe-to-toe with Casey Affleck and they have a duologue. Relatively short scene, maybe a couple of minutes long, but the emotion she gives in that one moment completely just destroys everyone else's performance in this movie. When you come out of this film, I think this is a very forgettable film, and it's going to take me a lot of enthusiasm to give it a second watch. But the one thing I'm still thinking about and still reeling from after this movie is finished is her performance in this film, mostly in the one scene. As I say, she's only in about 3 or 4 scenes, relatively small amount, but the one standout scene with her really does do it justice, and it almost reduced me to tears as well. It's one of the most believably acted scenes I've ever seen in my life. And in that scene, because she's so good, when she's up against Casey Affleck, an actor who's getting all this praise for this movie, and as I said, like, I didn't completely gravitate towards his performance. I found it very overhyped. When he is up against her in this scene, it really shows you how much better she is in this film compared to him. If he could have emulated that kind of performance, or if he could have emulated the emotional reach that she did in that one scene, I think I would have liked this movie a lot more. That brings me on to the script as well. A lot of people have been praising the script and how it's very naturalistic. The problem is with me with my scripts when they're naturalistic, and by naturalistic I mean that it's one of those films where you've got characters talking over each other the entire time, almost like it's improvised. There were some elements of that in Wolf of Wall Street, and those were probably my least favourite scenes in the film. Scenes that you can clearly tell the director's just got the camera and just keeps rolling and just says, say whatever comes to mind, we'll keep rolling. So you get these scenes that seem to outstay their welcome and go on for a little too long, or if there's a humorous moment in the conversation, they will just pound that joke into the ground until it's dead and gone. So there was a lot of moments in the film like that for me, and I was kind of just like banging my head against the back of the seat like, can we cut? Can we move on to the next scene? I think there were a lot of scenes in this movie that could have been tightened up, which could have left room for more things, and I'll get onto that with the ending in my spoiler section, because I do think that there's a lot that isn't tied up with this film. Again, maybe that's the point of the film, but I'll talk much more about that later. But yeah, the script really didn't do anything for me. There were no standout lines in this film to me. There were a few nice scenes, but I can't tell if most of the scenes were improvised, because it does have that quality to it. If done well, improvisation can bring that very believable human quality to it. And whilst I can praise this movie for having that and it being a drama piece, it needs to be as real as possible. When you're watching it as a film, as a viewer, the dialogue can get very frustrating, especially when you've got constant people talking all over each other all the time, or if the joke's just not hitting with you but they think it's funny and the director's just made them keep going with it. So I didn't really take to the script on this thing at all. And some of the jokes as well felt very quirky and out of place in the film, at least they did to me. Which brings me on to the ending. Now, I'm not going to give anything away here. I'm going to give a very brief overview. This is one of those movies like No Country for Old Men that just ends. I mean, I was watching it. It felt like there was another... It felt like it was coming towards the end, but it felt like it had another 20 minutes or so to wrap everything up. And it just cut. And the music came back in, and I thought, they better not roll credits now. And the credits started coming up. And I felt cheated by it. I honestly did. I felt that, okay, I was just starting to get into your movie. I was just starting to connect with these characters and experience everything they're going through. And you just end it. There is no story resolution to this film at all. Now, some people may argue that that's a good thing, because if you are dealing with loss, there isn't any clear-cut ending. You kind of have to make the best of it as you can. You have to make it up as you go along. And the ending symbolises the fact that they don't have all the answers. They're all going to lead an uncertain future. And that's the beauty of it. I can understand that as a viewer, as someone who's invested 2 hours 20 in this story, which is ultimately what it is, a story, you do want some kind of satisfying ending, or an ending that feels more earned and like you haven't wasted the last couple of hours of your life, because that's how I felt with this movie when it did end. There's no real character closure to anything in terms of the narrative, the story, or the characters, and that really bothered me, because I would have liked to have seen some growth in the characters. And whilst the main characters, the main two with Casey Affleck and Lucas Hedges, they do change by the end of the movie, it wasn't to the level that I wanted. And I didn't need everything wrapped up in a neat little bow at the end, but it did feel like it was missing something. Like it felt like it was missing a couple of reels off at the end, just to really bring closure to the story. We get a very throwaway duologue between the two main characters and a very beautiful last shot, and that's it. And I think everyone else in the cinema that I saw this with, because it was a moderately packed crowd as well, everyone kind of sat in their chairs a minute and they didn't know whether to leave. It was like that awkward, do I get up? Do I sit down? Is there an after credit scene? It felt like no one really knew what to think of the ending. And as I say, I might give this a second view and be completely on board with the ending and think it's absolutely genius. But in terms of my first impressions, that's what I thought of the ending. I thought it was very unsatisfying. So if I'm going to give my overall thoughts on this movie, I'll get into spoilers afterwards. It's a very well-made movie. It absolutely is. There are moments to all of the performances where the acting does shine. However, I don't think it's to the level that we've been led to believe with all the praise that it's been getting. This is definitely not a 96% movie on Rotten Tomatoes. It shouldn't be anywhere near the 90s for me. I would probably give it low to mid 70s in all honesty. There are some good moments in the film, a standout performance from Michelle Williams, but to me there wasn't really anything else to get invested in this story. And with the ending that it does have, I think that's going to turn a lot of viewers off, and I think they're going to feel cheated by the end and ultimately feel like everything they'd experienced or were following up until that point was pointless. So I know I sound really negative with this film, and it wasn't like I was completely like throwing my popcorn at the screen, really angry, because I didn't know what to make of this movie. I went to see it. It was an okay experience. However, I really don't think it deserves all the hype it's getting. I think it's a very average movie. It's a very well-made average movie, if you want me to combine my thoughts together. If you do follow the Academy Award films, if you are a film fan, I would still recommend checking it out and come up with your own opinion. As of now, I've only seen reviews that are praising this movie as the second coming. Maybe more reviews like mine will crop up every now and then, or maybe I'm going to be that one unpopular guy on the internet that didn't 100% care for this movie. But yeah, that'll do it for my overall thoughts. So I'll move into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen Manchester by the Sea and you are interested in seeing it, go watch it, come back to me, because I am going to spoil some integral drama and character elements to this story. So midway through the movie, we get a flashback with Casey Affleck's character where we really get the origin of his character as to why he is this very reclusive, depressed, lonely guy at the beginning of the film. We see there was this completely horrific accident where he was partying with some of his friends at his house. His wife, Michelle Williams, comes down and tells him to keep it down because it's early in the morning. It's about 2 or 3 in the morning. He gets rid of all his friends and then he realises that he's out of beer. The house is really cold, so he lights the fire to keep the house warm. He leaves to get beer. He comes back later in the night and he finds his entire family house in flames. His wife had been pulled out by the paramedics. However, all his children, I think he had about 3 children. I think he had a newborn baby and 2 daughters, if I remember rightly. All of them perished in the fire. And it's one of the most heartbreaking scenes, and it's a great performance from Casey Affleck in this scene. Again, when he shows this emotion, it's amazing. And then ultimately this leads to him and his wife separating, of course. They meet up later on in the movie, and this is the standout scene in the movie where she's moved on, she's got a new husband, she's got a child with the new husband, and she ultimately tells Casey Affleck that she still loves him. She would like to meet up for lunch sometime. She doesn't blame him. She said some horrible things about him. She didn't mean any of them because she knows it was ultimately an accident. It was a completely fucked up situation. And she sees him walking around in this depressive state that he's in this completely and utter limbo that is his life now. And she thinks it's heartbreaking. She wants him to be able to move on because it's ultimately a character that hasn't been able to move on, and that's the theme of the story, is that when he takes in his nephew, he has to step up as a guardian, as almost like a father figure. He has to be more assertive, and it's a way for him to find peace within himself and seek forgiveness for what happened to his children many years ago. This is a film that is told in a very non-linear order, and at first that did take me aback because there aren't clear points as to when it's a flashback and when it's present day. All the characters look exactly the same, so it does throw you for a second and it does keep you on your toes, but as soon as you know that these are flashbacks, you can kind of place it into the order of the story and the narrative, and it completely works by the end of the film. So they were by far the two best scenes, and when Michelle Williams breaks down and Casey Affleck's cracking, you see that human quality to him trying to break free, and he ultimately says, like, I can't meet up with you because I can't forgive myself for what happened. I'm sorry. And then we don't see the two of them together again. So it's a very poignant closure to those two characters. In many ways, both of them haven't been able to move on for different reasons. He can't move on because ultimately he caused the death of his children through an accident, granted, but it was ultimately him not being sensible. And also Michelle Williams, who still loves this guy who was the father of her children, but was ultimately the cause of death of them as well. So it is this great divide to the characters. And that was by far my best scene. My second best scene in the film is one involving Lucas Hedges, who they're trying to get his father buried, and they're dealing with a lot of things involving the boat that's been left to them, trying to get the money for that. Casey Affleck's trying to secure a new job. They're deciding about whether he's going to move back to Boston with him or if he's going to stay there. They're sorting everything out, and they just physically can't get to the funeral. So they've got the father on ice at the morgue, and Lucas Hedges' character keeps explaining that this is really playing on his mind. He doesn't like his father being on ice, and he keeps bringing this up every now and then. And there's a moment where he goes downstairs in the middle of the night to get some food, opens the freezer door, and all these like packs of chicken or meat fall out of the freezer, and he's trying to pick them up and put them in, but they keep falling out. And he starts to have a panic attack, and he's desperate. He's going absolutely frantic. Casey Affleck comes down, deadpan as ever, and says, like, what's the problem? He sits with him in his room until he calms down, and we find out the reason he was freaking out with this packed meat in the freezer is because he was thinking of his father, and the meat was reminding him of what his dad is like now. It's just a body on ice, just laying there. And it's a great moment to the character, because before this, and even kind of after this moment, he's an incredibly unlikable character who you kind of just want to punch in the throat or just give him a huge slap across the face. But this is where he shows that humanity. And the ending, and this is where I said I'm really divided on the ending, because we learned that Casey Affleck is going to go back to Boston and live there. He's got a new job there. His nephew will be able to come and visit him as and whenever. They've now got the boat up and running, and his nephew can stay with one of the family friends, and he doesn't have to move. He can stay at the same school. He'll have the same friends. He can still go to his band practices and his hockey games. Nothing has to change. And they're just sort of playing catch with each other down the road, and then they're sitting on the boat together and looking out at the horizon, and then the credits just start rolling. So the entire ending is basically summed up in one bit of dialogue, of exposition of what's going to happen to the characters, and then it kind of just ends. Really leaves it with that sense of they don't really know what's planned for the future. And as I'm explaining it now, it does seem like it is the best ending that this film could have. But seriously, when you watch it, it feels like it is missing an entire ending to round everything off. It leaves everything very much up in the air, and it doesn't feel like a satisfying ending for everything that you've just watched before this, because ultimately this is a film, and film is a narrative, it's a story, and I just didn't feel like it had justified the 2-hour 20 running time going through all this turmoil with the characters and the drama for a very, very anticlimactic ending. So that's really all I can talk about for Manchester by the Sea. As I said, it sounds like I'm really hating on this film, and I don't hate it. It just, with all the praise there, it's difficult to shake. As soon as you sit in that theatre and you know it's been nominated for all these awards, 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, everyone's praising Casey Affleck and all the performances in the film, you sit back and you watch it, it left me underwhelmed. Will I see it a second time? It's entirely possible. Maybe it's going to be one of those films, and this has happened in the past where I see a film for the first time hate it, watch it a second time, and it feels like a completely different movie, and I don't know what was wrong with me for hating it in the first place. Could be a case with this one, but as of right now, in my opinion, it does feel like it's very overhyped, and the negatives to me do outweigh the positives that this film does have. So that'll do it for my review on Manchester by the Sea. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought of this movie. Am I completely wrong? Did you love this movie? Let me know what you loved about it. Let me know what you hated about it. Anything you like, please do drop me a comment. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, as we are coming up towards Academy Awards season, there'll be many more movie reviews. I have seen a whole lot of films this week that I still need to do reviews for, including Martin Scorsese's Silence, Ben Affleck's Live by Night, and Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge. Still have many more to watch. I need to get them all in before Oscar season. So look out for loads more reviews in the upcoming weeks. There'll be trailer reactions from me as well, as and when brand new trailers come out. So look out for those. Please hit that subscribe button. It is the best way to keep updated with all of our content. And until the next video, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.